I was about to take the first bite of that simple chocolate cake when everything I thought I knew about fixing my broken life shattered. The woman standing in my kitchen wasn't offering me a service. She was offering me salvation, and I didn't even know I was drowning. My name is Ethan Cross, and 6 months ago, I had everything. A wife, a penthouse overlooking downtown Chicago, a portfolio that made financial advisors weep with joy, and enough zeros in my bank account to buy my way out of any problem, except the one that mattered. The divorce papers came on a Tuesday, delivered by a courier who looked more apologetic than my lawyer. Jessica didn't want my money. She wanted her life back, she said. The life I'd apparently stolen by being too busy building empires to notice I was losing my kingdom. The penthouse became a mausoleum. Every corner echoed with arguments I should have prevented, laughter I should have cherished, moments I'd traded for conference calls and acquisition meetings. I tried to fill the silence with noise, business deals, gym sessions, anything to avoid the reflection in those floor-to-ceiling windows that showed a man who'd won at capitalism but failed at being human. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning, like I always had, but instead of feeling energized and ready to conquer the world, I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, counting the ways I'd failed. The king-sized bed felt obscene in its emptiness. Jessica had taken her pillows, her books, the lavender essential oil she used to put on her wrists before sleep. She'd left behind the expensive sheets I'd insisted on buying, Egyptian cotton, 1,000-thread count, the kind that were supposed to guarantee perfect rest. They felt like sandpaper against my skin now. My assistant Rebecca started leaving concerned voicemails. Ethan, you missed the board meeting. Ethan, the Singapore investors are asking about you. Ethan, are you okay? I wasn't okay. I was dissolving, becoming transparent, a ghost haunting my own life. That's when I decided to outsource my recovery. If I could hire people to manage my investments, why not hire people to manage my life? It made sense in the cold logic that had always governed my decisions. Problem? I'm falling apart. Solution? Hire experts to put me back together. Simple, efficient, completely devoid of the messy emotional work that had always terrified me more than any business risk. I scheduled 3 interviews for the same Thursday afternoon. Efficiency, I told myself. Time management. The truth was, I couldn't stand being alone with my thoughts for more than a few hours. The silence had teeth. Interview number 1 was at 2 o'clock sharp. Layla Martinez arrived precisely on time, carrying a portable massage table and an air of professional competence that immediately put me at ease. She was in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled into a practical bun and hands that looked strong enough to break concrete, but moved with the grace of a pianist. Mr. Cross, she said, setting up her table in the living room without waiting for permission. I like that. Decisiveness. Action. Your assistant mentioned tension in your shoulders and lower back. That's just the surface. The body holds trauma in layers. I can help you peel them back. She had me lie down, fully clothed, and pressed her thumbs into pressure points I didn't know existed. The pain was immediate and oddly satisfying, like finally scratching an itch I'd been ignoring for months. She worked in silence for the first 10 minutes, her hands reading my body like Braille, finding every knot, every tight muscle, every place I'd stored stress and fear and regret. You're holding everything here, she said, working a knot below my shoulder blade that felt like a marble embedded in my muscle. Your body is screaming, but you're not listening. This isn't just physical tension, Mr. Cross. This is emotional armor. You've been protecting yourself for so long that you've forgotten how to relax. Her words hit harder than her hands. I felt something in my throat tighten, fought the urge to tell her to stop, to leave, that I didn't need some stranger psychoanalyzing me through pressure points. 3 sessions a week, minimum, she continued, moving to my neck. I can make you feel human again, but you have to commit to the process. This isn't a quick fix. Bodies remember everything we try to forget. I hired her on the spot. She left me her card and a schedule, promising to return Monday morning. After she left, I stood under the shower for 40 minutes, letting the hot water pound against the places she'd worked on, feeling simultaneously more present in my body and more aware of how much I'd been neglecting it. Interview number 2 arrived at 4 o'clock. Clara Fitzgerald swept into my penthouse like she was entering a salon in 19th century Paris. She wore a burgundy dress that belonged in a different era, carried leather-bound books under one arm, and spoke with the kind of accent that made even mundane words sound profound. Her perfume, Something floral and expensive filled the room before she did. "Monsieur Cross," she said, and I realized she'd already started the lesson. "Your assistant informed me you wish to learn French, but language is merely the doorway. What you truly seek is cultural elevation, n'est-ce pas?" She sat across from me at the dining table I never used, spread out books of French poetry, and began reading Baudelaire aloud. Her voice transformed my sterile apartment into something almost magical. The words washed over me. I didn't understand most of them, but I understood the emotion, the passion, the way she made dead poets sound like they were breathing in the room with us. For 45 minutes, I forgot about the divorce, the loneliness, the crushing weight of having everything except what mattered. Clara read and then translated, explaining not just the words, but the cultural context, the historical significance, the way the French understood beauty differently than Americans did. "We are too utilitarian," she said, closing the book and looking at me with eyes that seemed to see through my expensive suit to the hollow man underneath. "Always asking, what is the purpose? What is the use? The French understand that beauty itself is the purpose. Art, literature, philosophy, these things don't need to have a practical application. They feed the soul, and the soul, monsieur, is dying of starvation in this country. The body may be tended to," Clara said as she gathered her books, her fingers trailing along the leather spines like she was saying goodbye to old friends. "But the mind, monsieur, the mind must be nourished with beauty, philosophy, art. Twice weekly, we shall explore the French soul together. You will discover that there is more to life than profit margins and quarterly returns." I hired her too. She left with a promise to return Wednesday evening and a reading assignment, 20 pages of Proust. In French, she'd added with a smile that suggested she knew I'd struggle and found the idea delightful. By 6 o'clock, I was exhausted from pretending to be functional. The third interview was supposed to be quick, just a private chef to make sure I ate something more substantial than takeout and protein shakes. My refrigerator was a wasteland of expired condiments and bottled water. I'd been living on coffee, adrenaline, and the occasional protein bar that tasted like cardboard, and regret. I'd already decided to hire whoever showed up, sign whatever contract they put in front of me, and retreat to my study with a glass of scotch that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I just needed someone to make food appear, so Rebecca would stop leaving articles about malnutrition and depression in my inbox. The doorbell rang. I opened it expecting another consummate professional with a portfolio and a pitch. Instead, I found Maya Reeves. She was nothing like I expected. Late 20s, maybe 30, with flour dusting the sleeve of her denim jacket and dark curls escaping from a ponytail that had given up trying to contain them. She had brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled, and a smudge of what looked like chocolate on her cheek. She carried a small wooden box instead of a briefcase, and her smile was the kind that reached her eyes before it touched her lips, genuine in a way I'd forgotten people could be. "Mr. Cross?" she asked, though she was already walking past me into the apartment. "I'm Maya. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. I was finishing something and couldn't leave it half done. That's the thing about baking. You can't just stop in the middle. The chemistry doesn't wait." Fine," I said, closing the door and following her into my own living room, feeling oddly like a guest in my own home. She'd already set the wooden box on my coffee table, a piece of furniture that cost $12,000 and had never held anything more meaningful than financial reports and a few art books I'd bought because my interior designer said they'd look sophisticated. "So," she said, not bothering with small talk or credentials or any of the formal dance I'd become accustomed to in the business world, "your assistant said you need a private chef, but I don't think that's what you actually need." I felt my defenses rising like walls, like the armor Layla had mentioned. I was Ethan Cross. I built a venture capital firm from nothing. I'd negotiated deals with people who ate startups for breakfast. I didn't need some random chef telling me what I needed. I assure you, I know exactly what "When's the last time you tasted something?" she interrupted, opening the box. Inside was a single cupcake, chocolate with simple buttercream frosting. Nothing fancy. Nothing that belonged in the world I'd constructed around myself. It looked homemade, imperfect, real in a way that made my chest ache. "I eat every day," I said stiffly, which was technically true even if most of those meals came in plastic containers or paper bags. "That's not what I asked." She picked up the cupcake and held it out to me like an offering, like communion. I asked when you last actually tasted something, when you last paid attention to what you were putting in your mouth. When food was more than fuel or obligation or something to get through so you could move on to the next task on your list. I stared at the cupcake like it might explode. Ms. Reeves, I appreciate the gesture, but I've had a long day of interviews, and I really just need someone who can prepare healthy meals and maintain a proper kitchen, and you don't need another service, Mr. Cross. Her voice was gentle but firm, and something about it made me actually listen instead of just waiting for my turn to talk. You need nourishment. There's a difference. Try it. If I'm wrong, I'll leave and you never have to see me again. But if I'm right, maybe we can help each other. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that she was the first person in months who'd looked at me and seen something other than a checkbook or a project to fix. Maybe it was the way she held that cupcake, not pushing it on me, not insisting, just offering it like a gift with no strings attached. Maybe I was just tired of being right all the time, of having all the answers, of the crushing responsibility of maintaining the facade that I had my life together. I took the cupcake. It was slightly warm, like she'd pulled it from the oven right before coming here, timed it perfectly so it would still hold that magic temperature where baked goods are at their absolute best. The first bite was a revelation I wasn't prepared for. Chocolate that tasted like childhood and Saturday mornings, like the bakery my mother used to take me to before she got too busy, before I got too busy, before life became about optimization and efficiency instead of pleasure. Frosting that was sweet but not cloying with a hint of vanilla and something else, maybe espresso, that made the chocolate deeper, more complex, and underneath it all, a tenderness to the cake itself, a moistness that spoke of butter and eggs and someone who actually cared whether it turned out right. I realized I was crying, not dramatically, not sobbing. Just 2 tears sliding down my cheeks while I stood in my $12 million penthouse, holding a cupcake from a woman I'd met 3 minutes ago, tasting something real for the first time since Jessica left. Maybe the first time in years. Maybe the first time ever. Oh, I said stupidly, because all my expensive education, Harvard undergrad, Wharton MBA, all those executive leadership seminars, couldn't produce anything more eloquent than that single syllable. Maya's expression softened. Not pity, exactly. More like recognition, like she understood something about me that I'd been trying to hide from everyone, including myself. Yeah, she said quietly. That's what I thought. She sat down on my couch without being invited, pulled out her phone, and started talking about her philosophy of food. How cooking wasn't about Michelin stars or Instagram photos or molecular gastronomy that turned dinner into a science experiment. It was about connecting people to the fundamental pleasure of being alive, to the sensory experience that reminded us we had bodies, not just minds constantly racing toward the next goal. She talked about farmers' markets and seasonal ingredients, about the meditation of chopping vegetables and the chemistry of building flavors. She talked about her grandmother who came from Naples with nothing but recipes and determination, who fed her family through good times and bad, who understood that food was love made visible. I sat down beside her and listened. Actually listened, the way I hadn't listened to anything in years. Not thinking about my response, not planning my next move, not calculating the ROI. Just listening to this woman talk about tomatoes and basil like they were the most important things in the world, and feeling something in my chest unclenching for the first time in months. So here's my offer, she said finally, turning to look at me with those honest brown eyes. I'll come 5 days a week. I'll cook dinner and leave breakfast and lunch prepped. But there's a catch. You have to eat in the kitchen, with me. No phones, no laptops, no CNN in the background. Just food and conversation. Take it or leave it. Every business instinct I had screamed that this was unprofessional, that I was the employer and should set the terms, that eating with the staff blurred lines that should stay sharp and clear, that this was how people got sued, how professional relationships became complicated, how boundaries got crossed, and everything became messy. Deal, I said. She smiled, that same genuine smile that transformed her entire face, made her eyes light up like I'd just given her the best news, and extended her hand. Then I'll see you tomorrow at 6, Mr. Cross. Ethan, I corrected, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, her palm slightly rough with what I'd learned were calluses from years of kitchen work. If we're going to eat together, you should probably call me Ethan. Tomorrow at 6, Ethan. She packed up her box, gave me a small wave, and left. The apartment felt emptier after she was gone, but it was a different kind of empty. Less like a tomb and more like a space waiting to be filled. Like maybe, just maybe, there was something worth filling it with after all. I finished the cupcake standing at my window, looking out at Chicago spreading below me like a circuit board of lights and lives. Somewhere down there, people were eating dinner with their families, laughing at jokes, arguing about whose turn it was to do the dishes. Living the small, ordinary moments I'd been too busy to notice were what actually mattered. My phone buzzed, Rebecca checking in again. Instead of ignoring it like I'd been doing, I texted back, "I'm okay," or "I'm going to be. Hired a chef. See you Monday." That night, for the first time since the divorce, I slept without dreaming of everything I'd lost. Monday morning arrived with Layla and her massage table. I lay face down while her skilled hands worked through knots I'd been carrying since the divorce, maybe longer. She had this way of finding exactly where I was holding tension and refusing to let it hide. "You're less rigid than Thursday," she observed, pressing her elbow into my lower back in a way that hurt so good I almost groaned. Something changed over the weekend. "Just trying to relax more," I said into the face cradle. "Good. Your body needs it. Stress lives in the muscles, Ethan. Every worry, every fear, it all gets stored. We'll keep working on releasing it." She was right, of course. By the time she finished, I felt like I could actually stand up straight for the first time in months. I paid her, scheduled the next 3 sessions, and spent the afternoon in my home office trying to focus on quarterly reports that suddenly seemed less urgent than they had a week ago. At 6 o'clock sharp, Maya arrived with 2 canvas grocery bags that looked like they'd seen better days, and a smile that somehow made my kitchen feel less like a showroom and more like a room. "All right," she announced, setting the bags on my granite countertop that had never seen this much actual food. "Tonight we're making risotto. And before you say anything, yes, you're helping. I hired you to cook," I pointed out. "You hired me to nourish you," she corrected, already pulling out arborio rice, mushrooms, fresh herbs, and a bottle of white wine. "There's a difference. Now wash your hands and get over here." I found myself obeying, which was a strange experience for someone who spent most of his life giving orders. She handed me a knife and a pile of mushrooms. "Slice them thin," she instructed. "Not too thin. They need substance. Think elegant, not paper." I hadn't held a kitchen knife since college, and even then, it was usually to open takeout containers. My first attempts were clumsy, uneven. "Here," Maya said, moving beside me. She placed her hand over mine, guiding the knife. "Let the blade do the work. You're trying too hard." Her hand was warm, dusted with flour from something she'd baked earlier. She smelled like vanilla and something earthy. Thyme, maybe. I became acutely aware of how close she was standing, how her breath moved in and out in this steady rhythm that somehow made me breathe steadier too. "There," she said, stepping back as I completed a perfect slice. "See? You're a natural." I wasn't, but I kept slicing anyway, because it meant she'd keep standing close enough that I could feel her presence like warmth from a fire. She taught me about toasting the rice first, about adding the broth slowly, stirring constantly, being patient. "Risotto can't be rushed," she explained, stirring the pot while I added ladles of warm broth at her instruction. "It's about attention, presence. The moment you stop paying attention, it goes wrong." "Is there a metaphor in there?" I asked, attempting humor. She laughed, a real laugh, not the polite social noise people make at their boss's jokes. "Maybe. Or maybe sometimes a risotto is just a risotto. We ate at the kitchen island, which I'd always thought was decorative." She'd set out actual plates. She must have found them in a cabinet I'd never opened, and poured the wine we'd used for cooking. "Tell me something true," she said suddenly, twirling risotto on her fork. "What?" "Something true. About you. Not the Wikipedia version or the Forbes profile. Something real." I considered deflecting, making a joke, changing the subject. Instead, I said, "I'm terrified that I'm going to die having never figured out what makes me happy." She nodded slowly, like I'd said something profound instead of pathetic. "That's honest. I like honest." "Your turn," I said. "Something true about Maya Reeves." "I'm terrified I'll end up cooking in some restaurant where I'm making foam and deconstructed whatever instead of actual food that actually matters to actual people." "So why don't you open your own place?" She laughed again, but this time it was tinged with something darker. "You're a venture capitalist. Run the numbers. Single woman with culinary school debt and no capital? The banks laugh me out of the office." "Not all of them would." "Enough of them." She took a sip of wine. "But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight we're having risotto and pretending the world makes sense." Wednesday evening, Clara arrived with her leather-bound books and her air of old-world sophistication. We sat in my rarely used study, surrounded by first editions I'd bought for their investment value rather than their content, and she read Rimbaud's Le Bateau Ivre. "You see, Ethan," she said, closing the book, "Rimbaud understood that true freedom comes from intellectual liberation. The body is merely a vessel. It's the mind that must be set free." She had this way of looking at me that made me feel like I was being evaluated for a museum acquisition, valuable but in need of proper curation. "I've been thinking," she continued, standing and moving to the window that overlooked the Chicago skyline. "You and we could attend the opera together. The Lyric is doing Carmen next month. It would be educational, of course, purely professional." Something in her tone suggested it wouldn't be purely anything. "Clara, think about it," she said smoothly. "The examined life, Ethan. That's what Socrates taught us. You've spent so long building your fortune. Perhaps it's time to build your soul." She left me with a reading list and a lingering sense that I was disappointing her somehow by not immediately transforming into a French philosopher. The next morning, during my massage, Layla worked a particularly stubborn knot in my shoulder with an intensity that bordered on aggressive. "You're tense again," she noted. "After all our progress. What happened?" "Just work stress," I lied. "Ethan." She stopped, came around to where I could see her. "Your body doesn't lie. Something's bothering you. Is it the divorce? Is your ex-wife causing problems?" "No, nothing like that." "Then what?" She sat on the edge of the massage table, her dark eyes searching my face with concern that felt almost possessive. "You can talk to me. I'm not just your massage therapist. I care about your well-being. All of it." "I'm fine, Layla. Really." She held my gaze for a moment longer than comfortable, then nodded and returned to her work. But her touches felt different after that, more insistent, more like she was trying to claim something rather than heal something. Friday evening, Maya and I made pasta from scratch. She'd brought a pasta maker, an ancient hand-crank device that looked like it had survived 2 world wars, and showed me how to roll the dough through again and again until it was thin enough to see light through. "This is my grandmother's recipe," she said, her hands working the dough with practiced ease. She came from Naples with nothing but this pasta maker and a head full of recipes. Built a whole life here, raised 4 kids, buried 2 husbands, made pasta through all of it. 2 husbands? She said the first one was for love, the second one was for company, and if there'd been a third, it would have been for the health insurance. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my wine glass. "Your grandmother sounds incredible." She was. She taught me that food is love made visible. That's why I can't work in one of those restaurants where they're more concerned about the presentation than whether it actually feeds someone's soul. We cooked together in comfortable silence after that, her occasionally correcting my technique, me occasionally making her laugh with my ineptitude. When the pasta was done, simple butter sauce with fresh sage and Parmesan, we sat at the kitchen island again, which was rapidly becoming my favorite place in the apartment. "Can I ask you something?" I said, watching her twirl pasta on her fork with the ease of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. "Depends on the question. Why did you really take this job? You could be cooking anywhere. Why here? Why for some divorced guy who doesn't know a whisk from a spatula?" She set down her fork and looked at me. Really looked at me, in that way she had that made me feel simultaneously exposed and safe. Honestly, I was about to give up. I'd been to 15 interviews in 3 months. Every restaurant wanted someone with Michelin experience or someone who'd trained in France. Your assistant's call came the day I was writing my resignation letter to the entire industry. I figured, one more try. One more rich person who needs someone to make them complicated salads they won't eat. She smiled. But then I met you, and you weren't what I expected. What did you expect? An asshole, honestly. She said it so matter-of-factly that I couldn't even be offended. Another billionaire who thought hiring staff was like ordering from Amazon. But you actually tasted that cupcake. You actually cried. That meant something. It was a really good cupcake. It was a really broken man, she said gently. And I've been there. Different reasons, different broken, but I understood. So I took the job because I thought maybe we could help each other. The moment stretched between us, loaded with something I couldn't quite name. I wanted to reach across and touch her hand, but I didn't. She was my employee. There were lines, professional boundaries, all the reasons my lawyer would list if I even thought about it. I should go, she said, standing abruptly. It's late. Maya? Same time Monday? Yeah, Monday. She packed up her things quickly, avoiding my eyes, and left. The apartment felt cold again. Over the next 2 weeks, a strange dynamic developed. Layla's massage sessions became longer, more intimate. She started using essential oils that filled my apartment with lavender and eucalyptus, playing soft music, lighting candles. Ambiance matters, she'd say. Healing is holistic. Her hands would linger on my shoulders after the session ended, and she'd find reasons to touch my arm when we talked, to stand just slightly too close. Clara's French lessons evolved into philosophical discussions that felt less like education and more like courtship. She'd bring wine, a proper Bordeaux, none of that California nonsense. And we'd debate Sartre and Camus while she'd occasionally touch my hand for emphasis, let her fingers rest there just a beat too long. You have such potential, Ethan, she'd say. With the right guidance, the right influence, you could be extraordinary. But it was Maya who occupied my thoughts between their visits. Maya who never touched me except to correct my knife grip or show me how to test pasta for doneness. Maya who talked about her grandmother and her dreams and the restaurant she'd never have. Maya who made my kitchen feel like home. Monday evening, 3 weeks into our arrangement, I was chopping onions, proper dicing this time she'd taught me well, when she said casually, "So, which one are you going to sleep with?" I nearly cut my finger off. What? Your massage therapist or your French teacher? They're both circling. I'm just curious which one you're going to pick. They're professionals, and I'm not looking for. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Relax, Ethan. I'm just giving you shit. It's none of my business what you do. There's nothing to do. I'm not interested in either of them. Not like that. Good, Maya said, then immediately looked like she regretted it. She focused intently on the tomatoes she was crushing with her hands, turning them into sauce with an aggression that hadn't been there before. Not good. It's good you're not complicating things. Professional boundaries and all that. I set down my knife. Maya? These tomatoes are perfect, she said, not looking at me. San Marzano, you can't get better than this. Did you know that real San Marzano tomatoes only grow in the volcanic soil near Mount Vesuvius? It's the ash that makes them sweet and… Maya. I moved closer, close enough to see the flush creeping up her neck. Look at me. She did, finally, and her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears, or might have been anger, or might have been both. I'm not interested in them because I'm interested in you, I said, and the words came out before I could stop them, before I could calculate the risk, or consult my lawyer, or do any of the careful planning that had governed my entire adult life. She stared at me. Tomato juice dripped from her fingers onto my imported Italian tile. Outside, Chicago hummed with traffic and life, but inside my kitchen, the world had narrowed to just the two of us, and the confession hanging in the air between us. That's a bad idea, she said finally. Probably the worst I've ever had. I work for you. I know. There are power dynamics. It's inappropriate. I could lose my job, my reputation, and you could… I know all of that, I interrupted. I've been listing the reasons why this is impossible for 3 weeks. I have an actual list. It's alphabetized. Would you like to see it? A laugh escaped her despite everything. You alphabetize the reasons you shouldn't like me? I'm very thorough when it comes to bad decisions. I took another step closer. But here's the thing, Maya. For the first time since Jessica left, maybe for the first time in years, I actually feel something. Real. Not the performance of feeling, not what I'm supposed to feel, but actual, genuine, terrifying feeling. And it's you. It's been you since that cupcake. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, slowly, methodically, buying time. Ethan, I can't lose this job. I need the money. I have student loans and rent and… Then nothing has to change, I said quickly. We'll keep everything exactly as it is. Professional. I shouldn't have said anything. I'm sorry. Let's just pretend I… Stop talking, she said softly. I stopped. She closed the distance between us in 2 steps and kissed me. It wasn't the kind of kiss I'd had before, not the practiced performance of my marriage or the transactional kisses at charity galas where everything was about appearance. This was something else entirely. Her lips tasted like tomatoes and wine, and something indefinably Maya, and her hands came up to grip my shirt like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. I pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her hair, the other on the small of her back, and felt something in my chest crack open. Not breaking, blooming, like I'd been holding my breath for years and suddenly remembered how to breathe. She broke away first, breathing hard, her forehead resting against mine. This is still a terrible idea. The worst, I agreed, and kissed her again. We stood there in my kitchen, tomato sauce cooling on the counter, pasta water boiling over on the stove, and kissed like teenagers, like people who'd never been hurt before, like maybe the world wasn't as complicated as we'd both been pretending it was. When we finally pulled apart, the smoke alarm was starting to protest the abandoned sauce. She laughed breathlessly and said, "We're going to ruin dinner." I don't care. I do. I have professional standards. But she was smiling, her whole face transformed by it, and I realized I'd never seen her actually completely happy before. Go sit down. Let me fix this. And Ethan? Yeah? We're going to have to figure this out. The job thing, the power dynamics, all of it. Because I'm not interested in being some secret you're ashamed of. I could never be ashamed of you. Famous last words, she said, but she was still smiling as she turned back to salvage the sauce. That night, we ate slightly burned pasta and talked until 2 in the morning. Not about food or my divorce or her student loans, but about everything else. Childhood dreams and embarrassing moments and the weird things we believed as kids. I told her about the time I convinced myself I could talk to squirrels if I concentrated hard enough. She told me about the summer she tried to become a vegetarian and lasted exactly 4 days before her grandmother's carbonara broke her resolve. I cried while eating it, she said, laughing at the memory, sobbing over bacon. My grandmother just patted my head and said, "See, the pig understands. He gave his life for this. Respect him by enjoying it." When she finally left, we both agreed she should sleep at her own apartment. We were trying to do this right. I walked her to the door and kissed her goodnight, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Monday?" she asked. "I'll be here, wearing my Kiss the Cook apron." "You don't have a Kiss the Cook apron." "I'll buy one." She laughed and kissed me once more, quick and sweet, before heading to the elevator. I watched until the doors closed, then went back inside to an apartment that no longer felt empty. The next morning, during my massage, Layla noticed immediately. "You're different today," she said, working oil into my shoulders. "Looser. Something good happened." "Just sleeping better," I said, which was true. I'd slept through the night for the first time in months. "That's wonderful, Ethan. I'd like to think our sessions are helping." Her hands moved to my neck, her thumbs pressing into the base of my skull. "You know, I've been thinking. There's a holistic wellness retreat in Sedona next month. Week-long intensive. Massage, meditation, spiritual alignment. I could arrange for us both to go. Professional development, of course, but it would give us time to really focus on your healing journey." "Us both?" I opened my eyes, trying to see her face. "Well, I'd need to be there to maintain your treatment continuity," she said smoothly. "And Sedona is transformative. The vortexes, the energy, it's like nowhere else on Earth. Layla, I appreciate the suggestion, but I don't think—" "Just think about it," she interrupted, her hands moving down my spine with more pressure than usual. "You're making such good progress. I'd hate to see you backslide because you're not taking your wellness seriously enough." There was something in her tone that made me uncomfortable, a possessiveness that hadn't been there before, or maybe had been there all along and I'd been too self-absorbed to notice. "I'll think about it," I lied, because I didn't know how else to extract myself from the conversation. Wednesday's French lesson was equally uncomfortable. Clara had brought champagne, actual vintage Krug that probably cost more than my first car, and 2 glasses. "To celebrate," she announced, pouring before I could object. "Celebrate what?" "Your progress, of course. Your pronunciation has improved remarkably. You're beginning to understand the French soul." She handed me a glass and settled onto the couch beside me, closer than she usually sat. "I was thinking, Ethan, your apartment is beautiful, but it lacks culture. You should let me help you redecorate. Replace these soulless modern pieces with real art. I know several galleries, several artists who would be perfect. Clara, I'm not really looking to redecorate right now, but you should be. Your environment shapes your mind. Right now you're living in a magazine spread. Where's the personality? The passion?" She placed her hand on my knee, and I felt my entire body tense. "You have so much potential, Ethan. You just need someone to help you realize it." I gently moved her hand away. "I think we should keep our lessons focused on French. Just the language." Something flickered across her face. Disappointment, maybe, or anger carefully controlled. "Of course. How professional of you." She took a long sip of champagne. "Though I wonder if you're being quite so professional with everyone on your staff." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all." But her smile was sharp. "I simply notice things. The way you seem more animated lately. Happier. One wonders what or who has caused such a change." I stood up, ending the lesson early for the first time. "I think we're done for today." She gathered her books with exaggerated slowness, making it clear she was leaving on her terms, not mine. At the door, she turned back. "Be careful, Ethan. People aren't always what they seem. That chef of yours, for instance. Do you know anything about her beyond what she's told you? Her background? Her real motivations?" "Good night, Clara." She left, and I immediately texted Maya. "Can you come over? I know it's not your night, but I need to see you." She arrived 30 minutes later, still in her work clothes. She'd picked up a part-time job at a bakery to supplement her income. She smelled like bread and vanilla, and the moment I opened the door, I pulled her into my arms. "What happened?" she asked into my shoulder. "I need to fire Layla and Clara." She pulled back to look at me. "What? Why?" I told her about the Sedona retreat, the redecorating offer, Clara's veiled accusations. "They're not just being professional anymore. And the way Clara talked about you, Ethan, you can't fire them because of me. I'm firing them because they're making me uncomfortable, because they're crossing boundaries, because this is my life, and I get to choose who's in it." I took her hands. "And I choose you. Just you." "That's very romantic and also possibly illegal. You can't fire someone for being attracted to you if they haven't actually done anything wrong. So what do I do?" She thought for a moment, then sighed. "You be honest with them. You tell them you're in a relationship and that you need them to maintain professional boundaries. If they can do that, great. If they can't, then you can talk about ending the contracts." "When did you become so wise?" "I had to fire a sous chef once because he kept leaving me love notes in the walk-in cooler, covered in health code violations and romantic poetry. It was a whole thing." She kissed me softly. "But seriously, you need to handle this properly, for both our sakes." She was right, of course. The next morning, before Layla arrived, I prepared what I was going to say. When she started setting up her table, I stopped her. "Layla, we need to talk. I'm seeing someone. Romantically. So I need our sessions to stay completely professional. No retreats, no personal conversations beyond basic pleasantries. If that's not something you can do, I understand, and we can end the contract with full payment through the end of the month." She stared at me for a long moment, her expression cycling through surprise, hurt, and finally, a cold professionalism I hadn't seen before. "The chef," she said flatly. "That's not... It's fine, Ethan. Your personal life is your business." She started packing up her table. "But I think it's best if we end the contract. I can't in good conscience continue treating someone who's making such obviously poor decisions for their well-being. You're rebounding, latching onto the first person who shows you attention. It's textbook post-divorce behavior. Layla, I'll send you an invoice for services rendered. I hope you figure out what you actually need before you hurt yourself or someone else." She left, and I felt simultaneously relieved and guilty. One down. Clara was worse. When I gave her essentially the same speech Wednesday evening, she laughed, a brittle, crystalline sound that had nothing to do with humor. "How predictable," she said. "The wealthy man and his servant. It's practically Victorian, Ethan. Or would be if it weren't so pathetically cliché. Clara, that's not fair." "Fair?" She stood, gathering her books with sharp, angry movements. "What's not fair is wasting my time on someone who has no interest in actual growth. I thought you were different. I thought you wanted to evolve beyond your base impulses. But no, you're just another rich man who thinks money makes you interesting when really, you're as common as everyone else. I think you should leave." "Oh, I'm leaving. But let me give you one last lesson. free of charge. People like her, they see people like you as one thing only, a meal ticket. She's not cooking for you, Ethan. She's cooking you, and when she's extracted everything she can, she'll leave you emptier than your ex-wife did. Get out. She did, slamming the door hard enough that I heard my neighbor's dog start barking. When Maya arrived an hour later for our regular dinner, I was still shaking with anger. She took one look at me and pulled me into a hug. That bad? Worse. I told her everything, including Clara's parting shot. Maya was quiet for a long time, her fingers drawing patterns on my back. Finally, she said, "Is that what you're worried about? That I'm using you?" "No, God, no, Maya, because I need you to hear this, Ethan. I like you. I'm falling for you, but I'm also realistic about what this is. You're a billionaire. I'm a chef with $60,000 in student loans. There's always going to be people who think I'm with you for your money. Maybe there will even be times when you wonder if they're right. I won't. Let me finish." She pulled back to look at me. "If we're going to do this, really do this, we need to be honest about the complications. The power dynamic doesn't disappear just because we have feelings for each other. I can't keep working for you if we're together. It's not right. So you're quitting? I'm suggesting we renegotiate." She smiled slightly. "You need a chef. I need a job. What if instead of working for you, I worked with you? You were serious about wanting to invest in a restaurant, right? I'd invest in anything you wanted to do. Okay then, how about this? You back me in opening a restaurant. Small place, nothing fancy. Real food, real ingredients, the kind of place my grandmother would have loved. You'd be a silent partner. I'd run everything, and I'd pay you back out of profits, properly, with interest, all legal and documented." "Maya, you don't have to pay me back. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. Let me just—" "No." Her voice was firm. "I need to do this right. I need to know I earned it. Can you understand that?" I could. It was the same drive that had made me build my firm from scratch instead of coasting on family money. Pride, maybe, or stubbornness, or just the fundamental need to prove something to yourself. "Okay," I said. "Partners, with proper contracts and everything legal." "Partners," she agreed, and kissed me. We spent the next 2 months planning. Maya found a location, a former diner in Lincoln Park that had good bones and terrible wallpaper. I hired contractors, she designed the menu, and together we stayed up late sketching out what the space could become. It was the most fun I'd had working on anything in years. Our relationship shifted into something that felt more solid, more real. We fought about things. She thought I was spending too much on renovations. I thought she was being too conservative with the menu pricing. But we figured out how to fight fair, how to listen, how to compromise. 3 months after our first kiss, on a Tuesday evening in the unfinished restaurant, surrounded by paint samples and flooring options, I realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life arguing about crown molding with this woman. "Maya," I said, interrupting her passionate defense of subway tile. "What? I'm making a point here. The aesthetic consistency is important. Marry me." She stopped mid-sentence, her mouth still open, a tile sample frozen in her hand. "What?" I got down on one knee, right there on the dusty floor of our unfinished restaurant. I didn't have a ring. I hadn't planned this. But it felt exactly right. Marry me. Be my partner in everything. Not just the restaurant. Life. All of it. I love you. I'm in love with you. I want to wake up to your terrible bedhead and fall asleep to you stealing the covers. I want to argue about tile choices and menu pricing and what color to paint the bedroom. I want everything, Maya. With you. Just you." She was crying. Full-on crying. Tears streaming down her face. Mascara smudging. "You don't have a ring. I'll buy you 10 rings. 100 rings. Whatever you want." "I don't want 100 rings, you idiot." She was laughing now, crying and laughing at the same time. "I want 1 ring, but not some enormous diamond that's going to fall into the pasta sauce. Something simple. Something real. Is that a yes?" "Of course it's a yes. Did you think I was going to say no? After you just proposed to me in our unfinished restaurant surrounded by paint fumes?" She pulled me up and kissed me hard. Yes, I'll marry you. But we're getting the subway tile." "Done." We got married 4 months later, in the restaurant, 3 weeks before the official opening. It was small, just close friends and Maya's enormous extended family who filled the space with noise and love, and at least 7 different opinions on the proper way to make marinara sauce. I wore a suit. She wore a simple white dress she'd found at a vintage shop and looked more beautiful than any woman had a right to look. Her grandmother's pasta maker sat on a table of honor. Maya had wanted her there in spirit. During the reception, Maya's Uncle Tony made a toast that went on for 15 minutes and included at least 3 stories about Maya as a child that made her blush furiously. My own family was represented by my sister, who'd flown in from Boston and spent most of the night crying happy tears and telling Maya she was too good for me. When we finally left, sneaking out of our own wedding while Tony was starting his 4th toast, Maya turned to me on the sidewalk outside the restaurant that was ours, in the city that had brought us together, and said, "I can't believe this is my life. Good can't believe or bad can't believe. The best kind." She kissed me. "Thank you for tasting that cupcake. Thank you for baking it." The restaurant opened to reviews that ranged from glowing to transcendent. Maya was interviewed by food magazines, featured on local news, approached by larger investors wanting to franchise her concept. She turned them all down. "We're doing this our way," she'd say, and I'd fall in love with her all over again. A year into the marriage, on a night when the restaurant was closed and we were home in the apartment that no longer felt too big, Maya came into my study where I was reviewing quarterly reports. "Ethan," she said, and something in her voice made me set down everything. "What's wrong?" She held out a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. I stared at it, then at her, then back at the test. We're having a baby?" Apparently, our pasta-making sessions have been more productive than we realized. I crossed the room in 2 steps and picked her up, spinning her around while she laughed and told me to be careful. She might throw up. "We're having a baby," I said, setting her down gently, my hands going to her still flat stomach. "A whole human person. That's typically how pregnancy works, yes." But she was crying again, happy tears this time. "Are you okay with this? We didn't plan it. The restaurant is still new, and timing-wise, this is probably terrible." "It's perfect," I interrupted. "You're perfect. This is perfect. Maya, I love you so much it actually hurts sometimes. That's probably heartburn." "I told you not to eat the spicy carbonara." I kissed her then, long and slow and sweet, tasting the future on her lips, sleepless nights and first steps, and teaching our kid to make pasta from scratch. It tasted like coming home. The pregnancy was hard. Maya dealt with morning sickness that lasted all day, food aversions that made working in a restaurant kitchen nearly impossible, and fatigue that had her falling asleep mid-sentence. But she was radiant, growing our child like it was the most natural thing in the world. We decided to keep the gender a surprise. "Life has enough spoilers," Maya said. "Let's keep one mystery." 7 months into the pregnancy, on a Saturday afternoon when we were supposed to be testing new menu items, Maya's water broke all over our kitchen floor. The same kitchen where we'd made risotto and fallen in love. "Well," she said, looking down at the puddle, "that's one way to christen the new tile." The labor was long. 16 hours of Maya squeezing my hand hard enough that I thought she might break bones, of walking hospital hallways, of breathing exercises that didn't seem to help much. I'd faced down hostile board members and survived market crashes, but nothing had prepared me for watching the person I loved most in the world go through that kind of pain. "I hate you," she said at hour 14. "This is your fault. Your sperm did this." "I know. I'm sorry. Don't apologize." "Get me drugs. All the drugs. Every drug ever invented. You said you wanted to try natural. I'm changing my mind. That's allowed. It's my body, and I'm changing my mind, and if you don't get me an epidural in the next 5 minutes, I'm divorcing you and taking the restaurant." I got the anesthesiologist. At 3:47 a.m. on a Sunday morning in October, our daughter came into the world screaming her displeasure at the whole situation. She had Maya's dark curls and my eyes and lungs that suggested a promising future in opera. They placed her on Maya's chest, and I watched my wife, my strong, brilliant, beautiful wife, transform into something even more extraordinary. A mother. Our mother. "Hi, baby girl," Maya whispered, her voice wrecked from labor. "We've been waiting for you." I cut the umbilical cord with shaking hands, feeling like I was severing one life and beginning another. The nurse cleaned our daughter and wrapped her in a blanket and handed her to me, and I understood, finally, what people meant when they talked about love at first sight. She was perfect, tiny and red and wrinkled, and absolutely perfect. "What should we name her?" I asked, unable to look away from her face. Maya smiled tiredly. Nona, after my grandmother. The one who taught me that food is love made visible. Nana Cross. I tested it out. I like it. Nana Marie Cross, Maya corrected. Marie after your mother. I looked at her. This woman who'd walked into my life with a cupcake and somehow saved me from drowning in my own emptiness. Have I told you lately that I love you? Not in the last 20 minutes. I was starting to worry. I love you. I love you so much that I don't have words big enough to hold it. Try anyway. So I did. I told her about the day I met her, how I'd been planning to just hire anyone and get back to my life of profitable misery. I told her about the first time I realized I loved her. It was the night she'd taught me to make bread, and I'd watched her hands kneading dough with such care and purpose that I'd understood finally what it meant to be alive. I told her about every moment between then and now, every fight and laugh and kiss and conversation that had built the life we'd created together. That's pretty good, she said when I finished. But you know what the best part is? What? We get to keep doing this. Every day, for the rest of our lives. You, me, and Nona. Our daughter chose that moment to start crying again. Not the angry cry from before, but the confused, hungry cry of a brand new human trying to figure out this strange world she'd just entered. Someone wants breakfast, the nurse said, helping Maya with the first feeding. I watched them, my family, my whole world, and felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe, or purpose. Or just the simple, overwhelming gratitude of a man who'd gotten everything wrong until he'd gotten everything right. 3 weeks later, we brought Nana to the restaurant for the first time. Maya had designed a new tasting menu to celebrate. 7 courses, each one representing a moment in our journey from strangers to family. The first course was a simple chocolate cupcake, deconstructed and reimagined. The last was fresh pasta made with the same machine her grandmother had brought from Naples. We ate as a family, Nona sleeping in her carrier beside the table, and I realized this was what happiness looked like. Not the emptiness of my penthouse or the hollow victory of another successful deal. This. A restaurant full of people enjoying food made with love. A wife who knew all my worst parts and loved me anyway. A daughter who just learned to grip my finger and wouldn't let go. Hey, Maya said, reaching across the table to take my hand. You okay? You look like you're about to cry. I'm just thinking. About? About how I almost missed this. If I'd hired a different chef, if you'd arrived 5 minutes late and I'd already filled the position, if I'd been too proud to admit I needed help, all the ways this could have not happened. But it did happen. We're here. That's all that matters. She was right. The past, my divorce, the loneliness, the years of going through the motions, it had all led me here. To this moment, this family, this life. Sometimes, late at night when I'm holding Nona and watching Maya sleep, I think about the man I was before that cupcake. The man who thought he could buy his way out of pain, who confused service with connection, who'd lost himself so completely that he needed a woman with flour on her jacket to show him the way home. I don't miss him. But I'm grateful to him, in a way. Grateful that he was broken enough to ask for help. Grateful that he was smart enough to recognize salvation when it arrived in a wooden box. People ask me sometimes about the secret to happiness, to success, to a good marriage. They expect some profound business wisdom, some strategy they can apply to their own lives. But the truth is simple, almost embarrassingly so. I tasted the cupcake. When someone offered me something real, something made with care and attention and love, I didn't dismiss it. I didn't analyze it, or try to optimize it, or compare it to other options. I just accepted the gift and let it change me. That's the lesson, I think. The one I wish I could go back and tell my younger self. The one I hope someday I'll be able to explain to Nonna. Stay open, stay humble, and when someone offers you a cupcake that might save your life, for God's sake, say yes. Because you never know when the person standing in your kitchen with flour on their hands is actually bringing you home.